දැන් ඒකේ ටිකක් මුල කියලා හිටින්න ඕනේ නැත්නම් ඒක සම්බන්ධතාවය නැහැ නේ.
This is a continuation on yesterday's Dhamma Talk. During the Dhamma Talk, Lokambu mentioned that anyway, so the question was sometimes you kind of know what is good but and what is bad, but you are not able to completely let go of the bad, let's say, and what to do. So that was the summary of the question basically. So while discussing that, Lokambu mentioned some people they practice this paying attention and their mind gets kind of tranquil when they are here, but once they have gone home, very quickly they become even worse than before meditation. So they lose the one-pointedness and calmness, and even after a week or so, they go to some it might look worse than before. So then, in connection with that, Sabbasava, that's the second sutta of Majjhima Nikaya, was mentioned, where there is the removal or abandoning of these stains, which is a specific kind of defilement. So there are 7 mentioned. First one is dasanena. This is through seeing, which is basically the training that was mentioned of paying attention. And the last one is called bhavana or cultivation, which is another word for meditation, meditation development. But in between, that is numbers 2 through 7, there are other things mentioned, and if the person does not follow up on the practice that he is doing in the meditation center with the other things, what was described before happens. That means the person seems to revert to even worse level than before. So Kamada said he will try to talk a little bit about those other 5, that is number 2 to 6, especially in connection with when you are at home, what it doesn't mean. And this ties up with a question from somebody else, and part of that question was the person heard about sensory restraint or guarding of the sense doors, which is number 2 in this list, and was not sure what does it really mean or how to practice that at home and so on.
Make it again.
So we will just get into this shortcut version first.
මට මේ අකුරු පේන්නේ කන්නඩිය දාපුවාම මේකේ බැඳෙනවා මේ ඇයිද කන්න ඒකට ඉදා ටිකක් පේන්නේ. හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඒක.
අමීදුමද?
අමීදුමක් වෙලා ඒකට පේන්නේම නැහැ. කොහොම වෙච්චාම. අයියෝ. අති බික්කවේ දර්ශනා පහතබ පියකොන්නේ අති සංවර. ඒතර සංවර පහතබ ගියාම මේ ඉන්දිය සංවරය ඒක සතිය.
So this second way of dealing with these subtle defilements or deep defilements is called samvara pahataba, abandoning by restraint in English, but this samvara actually means sati, the faculty or the quality of mind that is there, is the main thing is sati.
ඒකට දැන් අපි මේ පුළුවන් තරම් මේ සතියෙන් ඉඳ මහාති ගන්න ඕනේ. සතියෙන්නේ අවිද්‍යා දෝමනස දෙක අයින් කරන්නේ නැති කරන්නේ.
This sati is this quality.
පොඩ්ඩක් කියමු මෙත්තානන්ද ආන්නේ.
Concept, let's wait for Venerable Nityananda to sit down.
කොහොමවත් තියාගෙන කියනවා නැත්තම් කරන්න බෑ වැඩි.
Do you want me to sum up or do you know we just what is it about the Makam? We got into talking about the other 5 things from the Sabbasava.
හරිනේ.
So we just started with the second one, that is Sabbasava.
මේ සතියෙන්ම මේ පෙරකේවා සතියෙන් මේ අයින් වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
So sati is this quality as it is described also in the scriptures of keeping the avidya and domanasa, this strong grasping or grasping after things, as well as rejecting or conflicting with things.
ඔව්.
But sometimes, even though it seems one is having some level of sati, those things are still not removed.
ඔව් අනිත් එක පටිසේවන.
Like there are things කියන්න අර පළකේව තමයි සතියෙන් අනිත්‍යව අනිත්‍යව. So there are like, as it's mentioned in the sutta, these influxes or these defilements, some of them they are to be tackled with the help of sati or this restraint. Some of them is the other things, and that's why you have these like 5 different tools. So first one is with the help of sati or mindfulness, you have this sense restraint.
So
Second one is called patisevana, which is translated as like wisely using or something like that. So that is, if you check the chanting book here and in many places, there is the reflection on using the 4 requisites. So this is sometimes called jnana samvara, or this like restraint by understanding. So in a way it's like covering other things that we have to deal with in our experience is something like sati.
මට මේ ප්‍රතිවේක්ෂාව කියන්න ගිහිල්ලා මම ඉතින් කල්පනා කළා කිවුරේ ඉන්න බෑ කියලා දවසක්.
So one time I was told about this reflection and using. I thought this is too much, I cannot stay in the robes.
ඉවර ගාරවල පොරෝණ සෑරයක් පටිසංඛායෝනිසෝ චීවරම් පටිදේවාමි කියලා දැන් උගන්නලා. අදනේ තේම හැම දෙයක්ම අර පොරෝණ සෑරයක් මෙන්නේ කරන. කුටියට යන්නේ වාරයක් පාසා මෙන්නේ කරන. දානශාලාවට යන්නේ වාරයක් පාසා. ඉතින් මේක එන කාලේ බෑ කියලා හිතනවා. හැබැයි ඉතින් ඒකත් අර සති සංවරයේ වගේම තමයි ඥාන සංවරය. ඒක නිකන් අමාරුයි ඒක.
So it's
සතිවේක්ෂාව.
it is very difficult to do. So this reflection, we have these particular stanzas which you are supposed to use when you are using those things. It goes something like reflecting wisely, I shall use this, let's say robe is the first one. So robe just to cover my body and ward of the heat of the sun and wind and creeping things and cold, and like cover up my nakedness, basically something like that. So then similar things you have for buildings. So then number 2 is about food. So I am wisely reflecting, partaking of this food not for fun and not for enjoyment, not for like beautification, not for the sake of sight and so on. And same thing for medication or like it means also refreshments when you are sick or weak. So the instruction given to Lokahamudra as a young monk was, anytime you deal with any of these 4, you have to reflect in your mind using these Pali stanzas. So it's like even if you, let's say, walk along the road and your rope just slips a little bit, you notice it as a slipping down. Decide with attention to put it back in the correct way. And while putting it back in the correct way, in your mind you should be reciting and reflecting on the while using the Pali stanza, I am using this rope wisely only like for this.
ඊට පස්සේ කිව්වා එක සැරයක් කට් කරන්න කියලා.
If you leave a building or enter a building, you have to do the same thing for buildings. So now that's why Lokama says this is like impossible to do. This is too much. That's why he was thinking of disrobing. So when he informed some like the teacher, he told him then you do it at least once a day. So that's why we have it as a part of the chanting, because that the one of in the evening chanting uses a bit different formulation. It starts, whatever of these I have failed to reflect on, then I am reflecting them at least now. Something like that is the idea behind it. So this monk that used to teach Lokohamudra about Vinaya or the discipline was very strict person. So because for a monk it's considered as kind of wrongdoing, as a kind of one type of offense if you don't do that. So then if Lokama wanted to don't stay without committing offenses, he would be like a bit maybe stressed out, because like even if he just did like this, he would have to like immediately do the reflection and so. Or if, like, I don't know, you mentioned like if you sweep or something like that, you are like getting out of the building and inside the building, so you have to like do many times just by going from the boundary from inside to outside. So anyway, this reflecting on these basic four requisites when we are using them on wise usage is a kind of very similar concept to this sense restraint, and it's similar to this restraint by just being mindful. So this is kind of similar things through understanding. Number 3 is adivasana, that is forbearance or patience. So there are like things specifically mentioned there in the sutta that one has to just bear up. Adivasana අනිත් විදිහින් හරියට නෑ ඒක තමයි adivasana. So it's like things mentioned there are specifically meant as a training for patience.
කන්ති ඒකට අදිවාසන කන්තිය දැන් අපි පිළිත් කියනකොට කියන්නේ කන්ති පරමත අපෝතිදිකා නිබ්බාන පරමං වදන්ති.
So there is actually in the usual chanting, I don't know if it's still being chanting these days, there is this section that was chanted every day towards the conclusion of the evening chantings, that is called Ovada Pati Mukha, kind of advice in brief, which is particular Dhammapada stanzas. So within them there is this line Kanti Paramam Tapoti Tika, that is patience with forbearance is the highest kind of asceticism, but asceticism is not good translation. It's like maybe like spiritual life or spiritual striving.
ඉතර පැරණි බුදු මයිතර බුදුආමර මහා ආයුක්කාලික බුදුවරු පාතිමොක්ඛේ තොච්චරයි කියන්නේ කන්ති පරම සබ්බපාව.
So why it's called Ovada Patimokha? So the word Patimokha is a bit, the translation has different, there are different ways how it's being translated, but it has something to do, it's like a moral code or like codex of one's behavior, especially in connection with morality. And now monks, in this Buddha's dispensation, we have something called Patimokha, which is particular 227 rules which are repeatedly chanting on full moon days and new moon days to like refresh that. And there are other many small rules, but we have this like set of 227 like specific ones that are codified like with the name Patimokha. So in the Buddha, before our Buddha was called Buddha Kassapa. So in his dispensation they didn't have this codex of 227 rules. Their Patimokha consisted of what we are chanting now as the Ovada Patimokha. That was all like their codex of behavior was that.
ඔව් දැන් එතකොට මේ අර පටිසේවනා අපි කිව්වනේ. පටිසේවනාවේ කොටසක් මේ අදිවාසනාවට තියෙනවා. දන්ද මකර වාතා තප දිදින්ද සම්පත්තාන ප්‍රතිඝාතයි. ඒක මැසි මදුරුවන්ගේ විවසන්ත පුළුවන්. සීත උෂ්ණ දාහ.
So these two, that is number 3, this wise using and forbearance, they kind of overlap to certain extent, because like with the robes we recite, we use them to ward off this like mosquitoes and crawling things and cold and heat and wind. So similar things are mentioned with this within this forbearance.
ඉතින් බොරු භාවනාව බොරු පැවිද්ද එහෙම කියනවනේ අනුන්ගේ වචන ඉවතන් වචන පතාන.
But this list starts with these like physical things, but at end of the lists that have to be like one have to be patient or bear them up is actually words by other people, especially like fake ascetics or fake monks, like very unpleasant, hurting, stabbing words that are used. So again, when that happens, we are instructed to use this patience or forbearance with those.
So I think it's hardest me කඳුබටට බනින මොකක්දනේ.
So in the old days, like, when the old original meditation center in Kanduboda was started, there was a number of people that was criticizing it quite often. There was actually like a whole movement against this meditation system.
මේක මොකක්ද කියලා දන්නේ නැහැනේ කළත් නැහැනේ කරන්නේ නැත්නම් විවේචනය කරන බයිනවා දොස් කියනවා.
So there were people that never tried that method themselves, but they just thought this is like something wrong, so they were like putting forward different critiques, but were not stopping there, so we were like really scolding or abusing it and using like bad language. So those, when that was happening again, that was the training to undertake, or what was it for us to do, was this being patient or bear it up.
එනවාද මේ පැවිද්දන්ට දොස් අහන්න නැති තැන නැහැ දොස් හැම දෙයකින්ම දොස් අහන්න වෙන්නේ.
Actually there are no places for a monk where one cannot there is no place safe where you would be safe from hearing some critique or scold.
දොස් අහන්න නැති වෙන එක ඉතින් හරි එහෙම ගන්න දොස් අහන්න වෙනවා.
So his best thing is like if you think like I should not think this this is a safe place or something where we will free from hearing these things. If you are a monk, so you should like always have it in mind. Here also I might anyway hear this some kind of scolding or abuse. So even the Buddha himself was abused by some people, like verbal abuse. One of them was so one of them is like skinhead or something. They were calling him skinhead. In English they put this word shaveling, because we are shaving, so the kind of abuse word using it, the fact that he didn't have hair was actually like they called him a shaveling, and other words like you one of them means something like you thief, or you I can't remember. This is you use it with young people that are just wasting their time, something like that. This kind of hooligans. Maybe like you can say you hooligan or something like that. So in the Buddha's times, actually, even guys used to wear like beards and long hair. So having like short hair or even like shaved hair was considered as a kind of shameful thing.
වරදක් කළොත් බලවත් වරදක් කළොත් රටින් පහ කරනවා.
So that
ඒ
was,
තත්ත්වේ බාලා මේ වගේ ඉත බාලා කාරෙන් දබ කබල් කැල්ලක් දීලා එළවලා.
so those days that was within the punishment system. There was this punishment called like eviction from the country, you might call it these days.
Oh.
So that those days there were like these cities and states were divided by like wilderness and jungles. So some people as a punishment, they were not executed but they were chased away from the kingdom. So they had to go through this wilderness, and before that they were shaved, like their head hair and beards were cut, and they were given this kind of orange or yellow orange basic robes and chased away. So if they managed to survive the wilderness on the other side, even when they came off the wilderness, they still were wearing those clothes, and everybody could see somebody had cut their hair and beard. So the people on the other side knew he must have done something wrong. Otherwise he would not be like this.
මේ කාලේ තමයි අපිට පැවිද්දන්ට මේ
But
සලකන්නේ.
these days, so the monks, they were wearing similar robe, the color was similar, and they were also shaving. So they were getting this abuse like that. So these days, of course, if
ඒක බුදුහාමුදුරුවෝ නිසායි අපිට වාසියක් වුණේ බුදුහාමුදුරුවෝ නිසා.
it's probably by the power of the Buddha, like in Buddhist countries, if you shave your head and wear the robes, you are treated with respect. But in Buddha's days, it was not like that all the time.
ඔව් ඒකට මේ ඒ වගේ නින්දා පහද වචන
Even the Buddha had to like was subjected to being abused verbally, criticized and scolded and things like that.
අත්‍යාග පරිවර්ජන. පරිවර්ජන කියලා කියන්නේ දැන් දැන් ගන්න කියන්නේ නපුරු බල්ලා ළඟට යන්න එපා, නපුරු හරක ළඟට යන්න එපා. එහෙමනේ. නපුරු අලියා ළඟට යන්න එහෙම තමයි කතාව.
So the next one, actually again there is this overlapping in a way. The next dealing of way of dealing with defilements is parivajjana or avoidance, which starts off with this saying like if you have a vicious dog or like angry bull or an angry elephant, you should avoid meeting with that. And some people stop at that. They say what this avoiding means is this one.
ඔව් ගෞරවල් කියන්නේ කුණු දාන තැන නගරේ.
So there is like mentioned number of, as before, it starts off with some dangerous physical places like this is kind of like that. This is like garbage heap, or I don't know if it's just. So in those days, behind the city walls or city limits, there was this area where all the refuse water and other refuse was like dumped. So like the one of the places mentioned is to avoid this better was this kind of dumping place for all the rubbish.
ඒ වගේ නපුරු සත්තු ළඟට යන්නේ කියන එකනේ උපමාවක් කිව්වේ. ඒ වගේ නපුරු මිනිස්සු ඉන්නවා.
So then
අකුසල් කරන දන්නේ නැති කපටිකම් වාගේ මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ඇතුළට යන්න එපා කියන එක.
So this mentioning of these dangerous animals, was there more as a kind of simile or example how to deal with what is there mentioned as towards the end of that list, that it mentions different people that are difficult to deal with and in a way dangerous. So Logan says it's why this wild elephant or wild bull are mentioned is like you should consider those people, dangerous people mentioned there, as being as a like wild bull or wild elephant in the same way. So like normal if you see wild elephant, you don't get idea to come near and like start being friendly with it or something. So you should consider those people mentioned there in a similar way.
අත්‍යාගව විනෝදන වීර්ය
මොන මිනිස් වර්ග ටිකක්?
දැන් ඉන්න දැන් කුඩු වන මිනිස්සු ඉන්න.
So
එතකොට
these
දැන් මේ
days,
කාලේ
these days, I asked if Lokam to put like talk a little bit more on this. So these days, you might consider it's not nice to use. Okay, junkies. Okay, people that use drugs. So especially if there are like more of them, you should consider in the
ඔය
same.
ඉන්නේ රංග අවුන්තරන් ඉන්න වගේ මේ කබල් මිනිස්සු. ඒගොල්ලෝ ඇතුළට ගියොත් ඉවරයිනේ මේ විදිහට. දැන් මේ
ගණන්කාරයෝ වගේ.
ඔව් ගණන්කාරයෝ වගේ.
So you can actually understand quite Lokam says even in Sri Lanka there are so many places or groups of people like that. So this is like thugs or mafia guys. So again, if you understand this is like this kind of person, the best thing is you avoid associating and coming in contact with such a person.
ඔව් දැන් මම ඒක කාරණයක් කියන්නේ. දැන් අශෝක මහත්තයා තමයි ඒකට ඕනේ මෙතෙන්ට. අශෝක මහත්තයා මට කෙනෙක් ගෙනත් ඇද්දා. අනේ මහානත් කළා. ඈ අන්තිම හොඳයි කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ දවස් කීපයක් විතර යනකොට ධම්මදීපය මට කියනවා අනේ ආ කුඩු ගහන කෙනෙක්. මම කිව්වා ධම්මදීප කොහොම ඉතින් ධම්මදීප ඉතින් මේ විරගෙදර දේලර්ගෙන ඉන්නේ. ඒක ඉතින් තේන්න මට ඇවිල්ලා කිව්වා ආන්නේ කුඩු ගහන කෙනෙක්. ඉතින් දැන් මම ධම්මදීප කිව්වට පස්සේ තමයි පිළිගත්තේ. නැත්නම් ඉතින් තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඊට පස්සේ මම
අපේ ඉන්න කාලේ
ඔව් අපේ ධම්මදීප
අර තරුණ කෙනෙක්ද?
ඈ ඔව් අර කොල්ලෙක් හිටියේ
අර පීතර
හරි
පීතර මහත්තයා.
පීතර මහත්තයා නෙවෙයි.
නෑ අර සම්බන්ධයකට
දැන් මේ අපේ අශෝක මහත්තයා කියන්නේ.
So there was this Mr. Asoka brought this person to Lokohamuduru, and the person seemed to be genuinely interested in practicing Dhamma and even ordination. So the person got ordained, but this was like more than 10 years ago when Venerable Dhammarakiti's younger brother was still in Rhodes. He was known as Venerable Dhammadipa. So this Venerable Dhammadipa, when he was a layperson, he used to work in a prison as a guard, so he knew all kind of different people. So he told Lokohamuduru, Bhante, this person because this person that was brought by Mr. Ashoka is now ordained, he is actually a drug addict, and it's like, but he's still like shooting, or he's still addicted. So only when Dhammadipa Hamuduru told Lokohamuduru about this, Lokohamuduru accepted that because he knew Venerable Dhammadipa used to work in a prison, so he knows how to recognize these people from different things. So ultimately, so and it came true. Actually, he was like really still doing drugs even as a monk. So he was after Lokohamuduru ascertained, like he made sure that what was being said about this guy was true, and he was causing actually more and more trouble. So eventually Lokohamuduru asked him to just leave the place.
තව කොටසක් ඉන්නවා ඉතින් ආත්‍යාස විනෝදන. විනෝදන කියන්නේ වීර්යය.
හරි. ගාලිකා කාන්තාව කියන්නේ
ඔව් ඒකත් හොඳයි. ඒගොල්ලෝ ඒ තැන් වලට යන්න හොඳයි.
So there's like I asked Lokohamuduru, one of them is mentioned something like prostitutes, and this was like for monks. So like for especially for monks going to a place where there are prostitutes and similar people is also like not a good idea. So that is the place for people to have.
විනෝදනා කියන්නේ ඒක වීර්යනේ.
So the next way of dealing with defilements is vinodana, or in English called abandoning by removing. So it is basically giving this description that is used in other places for effort or this mental energy or effort.
වීර්යය කිව්වම දැන් අපි මේ ඇත්තට කුසල නෝපං කුසල ඇති කර ගන්න ඕනේ.
So it is when we talk about virya or effort, so energy, mental energy or efforts is to do with wholesomeness. So it is this fourfold way. This unarisen unwholesomeness you prevent from arising, you guard the mind from that. And if there is some already arisen one, you try to remove it and abandon it. Then the unarisen wholesome things you nurture, give it whatever is needed for its arising. And if there is already arisen wholesomeness, you protect it and make it stronger. So along with those lines is this abandoning by removal.
ඉතින් දැන් ඒ විදිහට මේ ඒ පහ කරපුවට කරුණු පහක් දැන් දර්ශනය හැර භාවනා හැර ඉතින් එතකොට ඒකකින් යන්න පුළුවන් මේ ගමන.
So this is now so far we have mentioned the other five. So this way of dealing with these specific defilements contains, first one is dasanena, which is something like the meditation as mentioned before. Last one is bhavana, is this special level of meditation called bhavana. But other than that, the other five in the middle have been mentioned now. That is restraint, then restraint by wise using, patience, avoidance, and removing. We remove it. Dinodana kiyana upan akusala. So this vinodana is especially the part of right effort or mental energy that has to do with removing unwholesome thoughts. So there are like different unwholesome types of thoughts mentioned, and again is the way how to deal with that is like you remove them, don't let them stay, stop them, and so on. So it's that part of effort.
ඉතින් භාවනා කියන එක මේ තියෙන්නේ පසු
So what is called bhavana pahataba, or abandoning by development, as the translation or cultivation, is something that happens eventually later on.
දැන් මේ විදිහට ධර්ම පහ මේ එකක් හරි මෙනෙහි කරනවා නම් එකක් හරි හරි මේ මෙනෙහි කරන එකනට මේ කාමාශය ඉපදිලා තියෙන එක අඩු වෙනවා. අඩු වෙච්ච එක නැති වෙනවා. වැඩෙන්නේ නැහැ. භවයත් එහෙමයි. භවයේ උපදීද උපන් භවය. ඒවා ඒතකොට නෑ. ඒතකොට කාමය, භවය, අවිද්‍යාව. මේ කියන කරුණු ක්‍රමානුකූලව අඩු වෙනවා. කාමය, භවය, අවිද්‍යාව.
So as one is continuing this practice, that means the mind is always contemplating or noting or apprehending the objects through one of these things mentioned. Sensuality is reducing, existence or this kind of this condition in the mind that has to do with existing is reducing, and likewise ignorance. So by continuously contemplating or noting things along those lines, these things, that is sensuality, existence and ignorance, are reducing.
ඉතින් පස්සේ ඉතින් භාවනා පටන් ගන්න.
So later on the bhavana level of practice starts.
භාවනා ලෙවල් කියන්නේ මේ සංකාරූපේක්ෂා උද්‍යප්පේ ඉඳලා සංකාරූපේක්ෂාට යන භාවනා ලෙවල් එක. එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ මාර්ගඵල ලැබුවයන් පස්සේ මේ කරන භාවනා කරනදී.
So here this bhavana is especially here this bhavana or cultivation or development is mentioned especially with these bojjhangas of enlightenment factors. So within the practice that we follow, there are these so-called insight knowledges, starting with Udabhaya Jnana, that's the knowledge of rise, fall, or rise and disappearing. And there is like number of these insight knowledges up to the equanimity towards formation insight knowledge.
මේ සබ්බාසව සූත්‍රයේ පොඩි සාරාංශයක්.
So this when one is going from this Udayabhaya Jnana up to the Sankarupekha, the practice sometimes go up and down few times. So when the person is within that level of practice, what is being actually developed and cultivated are these enlightenment factors. And that is for somebody that has not achieved the path knowledge yet. So for somebody that has already achieved a path knowledge, that person has it's the person already the enlightenment factors have arisen during the path knowledge. So like developing later on this path, these enlightenment factors is what is considered as bhavana pahatapa, is abandoning by development.
Oh, it may
So there are things that are actually mentioned as things that should be ignored on purpose or not known. So if you know those things, it is of no use. So it is because if you pay attention to those things, the defilements that have been reduced by practice will start coming up again. So it's like in practical terms, it's maybe like watching the TV or things like that leads to like reactivation of these defilements.
Oh, I think මේ පොඩි ටිකක් නේ කිව්වේ මේක ගොයිලා වගේ දිගට කියන්නේ කියලා. හොඳයි.
So Lokang said he has gone through the sutta quite in a brief way. We had just a cursory or brief look at the sutta, but it's worth to really go through that slowly and get deep into that. ඉතින් අර ගෙදර ගියා
මම ගෙදර ගියාම මෙනේ කරන්න
අර සංවර ගැන උකම් කියන
ඔව් සංවරය ගැන තමයි. ඉතින් සංවරය ගත්තාම
so I asked මහත්තයා අහන්න අර සංවර කොයි විදිහින් කරන්නේ දන්නේ නැහැ ඒකයි.
සංවරය කියන්නේ දැන් වැඩක් නැතිව තියෙන.
ඔව්.
දැන් ඒ වැඩක් නැතිව සංවරය කියන්නේ සති සංවරයනේ. එතකොට දැන් සතිය කියන එකමනේ සංවරයට කියවෙන්නේ. එතකොට දැන් අපි දැන් ඔය වැඩක් නැතිව බලන්න කතා කරන්න ගියොත් තමයි ඒක එන්නේ. ඉතින් ගෙදරක තියෙන දේවල් කතා කරන්න කියන්න ඕනේ. දැන් ඒක ජීවත් වෙන්න බෑනේ. දැන් අනාථ පින්ඩික මාර්ගඵලලාභී.
ඔව්.
ඉතින් නව කම්පැනි කරුව වෙලා හිටියනේ. ඉතාලි මාර්ගඵලලාභී. ඉතින් හිටියනේ. ඉතින් මේ ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉතින් කතා බහ කළා වැඩ කළා ඒ වමනා කරන සේවකයන්ගේ ඒවා කරලා දුන්නා. ඒකවට යුතුයකම් හිටුවා ඔක්කොම කරලා තියෙනවා. මාර්ගඵල ලැබුවයි කියලා අයින් වෙලා නැහැ.
So Lokang said anyway, so firstly, like there are things that are not conducive, like not good, so one should try to stay away from those as much as possible. But if you are living a normal daily life, you have to engage with those things. So in Buddha's times, the chief lady supporters like Anathapindika and Visakha, they were stream enterers, but they were living very busy family and home life. So they had to deal with different servants and people they were in charge. Both of Visakha was in charge of the whole household, and Anathapindika was basically overseeing some merchant organization. So he had many people under him. So they had to deal with those other people and issues, and it was like that.
Oh, ඉතින් අර ධනය හොයන එක සම්මාජීවයෙන් හොයන. සම්මාජීවය.
So if we consider part of the lay life is some kind of livelihood you have to find some way how to like survive. So for that one, isn't the right practice is one should stick to right livelihood while so this one's livelihood should be the right livelihood. And this is very important like factor. The right livelihood should be really kind of, let's say, pure. හාමුදුරුවෝ අයිතේවා ගිහි අයට ටිකක් අයිතිද? So what is standardly mentioned as right livelihood is avoiding certain trades or like involvement in certain kind of business areas like selling meat, selling live animals, dealing with slaves, poisons and weapons are usually mentioned. And I asked Lokam, there is another part which is normally understood, people may understand this is like for monks, but it is also actually there for lay people, that is like kuhana means deceit, so using deceit to gain things, or with this thinking of getting more and more using different tactics like hinting and maybe like bribing and other different crooked ways to get more and more. All these things, even though they are mentioned for monks, they are actually also like similar things applicable for lay people.
ඉතින් දැන් බලන්නකො ඒගොල්ලෝ ජීවත් වෙලා තියෙන ක්‍රමය එව්වහම අපිට මේ ප්‍රශ්න හුඟක් අඩුයි.
So if you manage to live in this very pure way, then the issues you might have are very much reduced.
දැන් ඔය හුඟක් දෙනෙක් හිතනවා මේ මාර්ගඵලලාභය කිසි වැඩක් පොලක් නැහැ නිකම්ම ඉන්න කෙනෙක් එහෙම කෙනෙක් නෙවෙයි.
So this Lokam says, why Lokam says this is, many people have the idea that somebody that has some path knowledge is just like a free thinker that is not working or doing anything. But from the scripture we know like the Anathapindika was this like merchant baron, like boss of big merchant group, and Visakha was like in charge of this big household. It was like millionaire's household, so it was a big thing to so they were not just people sitting aside doing nothing. They had to do all kind of like engage in all kind of activities.
I think then wait a minute. කවුද මේ චිත්තගහපති අනාගාමී කෙනෙක්.
හැබැයි චිත්තගහපති මොකුත්
නෑ මොකද නෑ චිත්තගහපති ඉන්නවා. ඒ වගේ එහෙම ඉන්න පුළුවන් ඈ. මමත් ඉන්න ඒවා ඒගොල්ලෝ
අනාගාමීනේ.
රැකියාවන් කරන්නේ.
So the only exception there in the scriptures is one of the main like a prominent lay followers of the Buddha was called householder Chitta. But he was an anagami with all the 8 jhanas and other things. So when he attained to that level, he stopped like getting involved with the worldly things too much. But that is because he was an anagami.
ඉතින් දැන් ඔය මේ කවුද කුජුත්තර කුජුත්තර මාර්ගඵල අනාගාමී කෙනෙක්.
කුජුත්තර කවුද අර
සාමාවතිගේ ගෝලයා.
So this මෙයාගේ දාස භාවයක් නැති වෙලා නේ කරන්නේ. So the other day we had this as a topic for the Dhamma Talk was Sutta from Itivuttaka Pali. That this Itivuttaka was this selection from Kuddaka Nikaya, from the miscellaneous part of the scriptures that was reported by this slave servant to one of the queens, and that's why it is called Itivuttaka does hurt by me. And but this lady that used to go to the monastery and report to the queen, she was an anagami. So, but like she was anagami, but she was still in the position of this servant slave for the queen. So even though she was an anagami, she had to do all, some things, because being an anagami didn't do anything about her slave, like this slave servant position. So then we had also some time ago, we were going through this Gatikara Sutta, Gatikara Kane.
Oh.
That is Sutta 80 something in Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses, and it talks about this person called Gatikara who was the chief supporter of the previous Buddha Kassapa. And the sutta explains how he was looking after his blind parents, and his livelihood was, he was a potter, but he would not dig the ground. So when there was on the side of a river some fallen, some loam was washed out by the water, it fell down, so where he could just gather it, or if mice or other creatures, when they dig, they have these mounds of earth, so then he could gather that without digging, and he was using that to make pottery. And he was not charging people, he just displayed the things and said, if you like something, whatever you think is good in exchange, you give me that in exchange, and that is so his livelihood was like that. And he used to look after the parents, but he was an anagami also. But from that you can see, even though he was an anagami, he was still doing this, having his this pottery shop and looking after the parents. It's not the way we might think about anagamis.
ඒ තමුන්ගේ අනිත් වැඩ කටයුතු කරනවා. දැන් අපි කියමුකෝ රහතන් වහන්සේ කෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා කියලා. ඈ දැන් මේ ඒකට එයා මෙන්න වැඩ නොකර ඉන්නේ. ඒ ඔක්කොම වැඩ කරනවා.
So if you have an arahat, that does not mean the arahat stops doing things. Whatever are the obligations, and normal workload associated with his position, the arahat will be doing that.
Oh. Dar body hanama කතාවක් තියෙන්නේ වතුර ගෙනත් දෙනකොට ඇහි එනවා රහතන් වහන්සේ අවුරුදු 7. ඉතින් ඒ වගේ කතා තියෙනවා.
දැන් හරියට මතක නැහැ.
ඔව් රහතන් පොඩි රහතන් වහන්සේ කෙනෙක්.
ඔව්.
ලොකු ආණ්ඩුව හරියන්නේ නැහැ.
ඔව්.
ඉතින් ලොකු ආණ්ඩුවෙන් වත් පිළිවෙත් කරනවා.
ඔව්.
ඒ වත් පිළිවෙත් කරනකොට මේ ආම්ද්‍රං ගැටින් මෙහෙම ගන්නකොට දැටි කොට ගන්නකොට ඇහි මෙතන හැප්පුණා.
ඔව්.
හැපිලා තුවාල වුණා. තුවාල වුණාන් පස්සේ ඒක ඉතින් ඒ ඊට පවදන ඒක අතකින් මේව කරගෙන ඒක අතකින් පිළිගන්නවා. එතකොට ඇහුවා මොකද ඒක අතකින් පිළිගන්නන්නේ කියලා. එතකොට කිව්වා මෙහෙම මේ වුණා කියලා. දැන් බලන්න රහතන් වහන්සේ කියලා නැහැනේ.
So this story from Sasanavattarana, there is a book by this quite popular in Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan monk called Chandavimala.
Oh, nice.
Rerukane Chandavimala, and he wrote this book, which means anyway, so it is book that is used for people that want to get ordained, to get introduction into the dispensational, about the monks' rules and things. So one story mentioned there, probably from the commentaries, is this: in the old Sri Lanka there was this monk, young monk Samanera, novice, and his teacher was a senior monk who was still a Putujana, but the small novice monk was already an arahat. So he was still doing all the duties of a student of his pupil. And this small novice, he was only 7 years old, but he was already an arahat. So he was like sweeping for his teacher and doing all these things. So while doing that, one day when he was getting ready, he was standing somehow like I think behind the monk, and the chief monk like moved suddenly and damaged his eye. So the next day when he was offering water, he was covering this damaged eye by one hand. But anyway, what happened was the proper way of offering water or other things is by both hands. So his teacher was like, why are you using only one hand? And he said like, my eye is now damaged, so I am like protecting it from other harm, and so that's why I use only one hand.
ඉතින් මවාගත්ත මාර්ගඵලලාභයෝ ඉන්නවනේ මෙහෙම කියලා
So
ඒ අයත් අපිට ජීවත් වෙන්න අමාරුයි.
So this shows he was already an arahat and what kind of behavior he had. So Lokam says these days you have these people who somehow got idea they are already arahats, but it's just their ideas. Some like they kind of conjured this idea in their own minds, and those kind of like not real arahats, they are quite often difficult to live with and associate. Because the arahatship is not the real thing.
ඉතින් දැන් මොකද්ද අපි කිව්වේ
අර සංවර ටික සබ්බාසව සූත්‍රය අර මහත්ය
සංවර
කියන්නේ.
ඉතින් සංවරය කියන එක ඉතින් මේ ගෙදර දැන් බාහිර කතා බහ කරන්න ඕනේ, වැඩ කරන්න ඕනේ, බිස්නස් කරන්න ඕනේ. ඈ ඒකෙන් නපුරු වචන නපුරු ඒවා කියන්නේ නැතුව සංවරය. නපුරු වැඩ.
So first thing is like if you are a lay person, you have to like so you have to deal with the things that lay people deal with, like you have probably some people at home you have to interact with, and you go to work or something like that, or shopping, so you have to deal with those things. But while you do that, you should try to be as kind of try to avoid the unwholesomeness from arising.
මේකට ඕනේ නැති කතාවක්. දැන් උපසම්පදා ආන්දු ඉන්නවනේ. උපසම්පදා මොනවා කියලා නෑ, රහත් වුණා කියලා නෑ. උපසම්පදා කියන්නේ ඒ ඔක්කොම වැඩ කරන්න ඕනේ. දැන් අපි කියමුකෝ දැන් මේ කවුරු හරි රහත් වුණා කියලා මෙත්තානන්ද. ඉතින් මෙත්තානන්ද රහත් වුණා. දැන් මෙත්තානන්දට වැඩිමල් ඇය ඉන්නවා. ඉතින් මෙත්තානන්ද අපි රහත් වෙලා කියලා වැඩ නොකර ඉන්න රහත්කමක් නෑ ඒක.
So this is not for lay people, but Lokam says like there is within the dispensation certain things that are connected with especially like higher ordination. One of them is the Buddha established these duties and obligations connected with seniority, and seniority is only recognized according to one's ordination, how long the ordination is standing. So Lokam says as an example, let's say Mettananda becomes an arahat, and so this is like just an example. So then if he stops doing those duties that he has as a junior monk to senior monks, that means the arahatship there is not a valid arahatship.
දැන් ඒතකොට දැන් අරහත් වුණොත් අර මේ දවස් ලොකු දාන්තාලා වතු ගන්නවා ඒකත් මෙත්තානන්ද නොකර ඉන්නවා දැන්.
Or like let's say these days Venerable Mettananda, if he's like helping with sweeping the dining hall downside, and if he became an arahat, he would stop sweeping it thinking he's an arahat, so that means also there is something wrong with that kind of arahat.
නෑ ඒවා කරනවා ඒ විදිහටම. මංගල දැන් මේ දානශාලාවෙම අතු ගන්න මේ ඈ ඔක්කොම කරලා ඉන්නේ. දැන් බැරි වෙලාවට රාත් වුණොත් මංගල ඒවා කරන්නේ නැතුව ඉඳී අනිත් සැරේ. මංගල දැන් මේ දවස් මොකක් වස්තික දෙච්චන්නවනේ. ඒක රාත් වුණොත් එහෙම ඒවා හොඳ නැහැ කියලා මංගල නිකන් එහෙම ඉන්නේ.
අඩුවෙන් කරනවාද?
නෑ අඩුවෙන් කරනවා නෙමෙයි, හොඳට කරනවා ඉස්සෙල්ලටත් වඩා හොඳට.
Okay, no,
තේරුන්නේ හොඳයි.
අර බන්තේ අර මට අර එකක් තියෙනවා අර ලොකු හාමුදුරුවෝ කිව්වනේ අර නිකන් අර ඉන්ද්‍රිය සංවර ගැන.
ඔව්.
සායන් කියනවා අර හොඳව දැකීමද රහමග එනවා.
ඔව් එනවා.
ඒක දැනගන්න ඇති.
ඔව්. දැන් ප්‍රතික්‍රියා කියන්නේ
අසුබ කරන්න
අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. දැන් අපි කියමු ඉන්ද්‍රිය සංවරය කියන්නේ ඒකයි. රසේව තේරෙනවා. ඈ?
So I asked Lokahamdu something that helped me in the beginning when I could not understand what this sensory strain meant. Was this Lokahamdu explained is you recognize the sensual experiences for what they are. That's so if the food is tasty, recognizing good taste, or if something has a nice sound or smell, recognizing that is okay, but you stop there. Wedding never so like recognizing something is a nice pleasant experience is okay, but you stop there. It is where this tendency of mine of like enjoying it or enjoying it more and more, that is the part of the non-restraint. So if you stop at the nice, pleasant or even unpleasant experience at that point, that is the sense restraint.
දැන් කණ්ඩ බැරි එකක් රහ නැති එක රහ නැහැ කියලා දන්නවා. කණ්ඩ ඕන බෑ කියලා දන්නවා. ඉතින් ඒක මේවා හදලා තියෙන්නේ උඹ දන්නේ ඌව ගන්නෑ ගිගියක් එහෙම එකක් නැහැ.
So like Lokamu to the opposite. So if let's say the food is bland or even tasteless or even like not tasting really nicely actually. So you just recognize it, but you no need to like throw it. What is this shit or something like? No need to do. You just recognize it is bland or the taste is not suitable, does not suit you, and you stop at that.
यार कबल गतिगुण නැහැ කියන එකයි. ආර්ය පුද්ගලයාගේ ස්වභාවය ආර්ය පුද්ගලයාක් වෙන්න යන එක්කෙනාගේ ස්වභාවය ආර්ය පුද්ගලයාගේ ස්වභාවය यार කබල් ගති නැහැ. ඒක කබල් ගති කියන්නේ කණ්ඩ ගියාම පනිනවා.
Fun with training.
Oh.
Kabal කියනවා.
No, this is very difficult to. So it's like the person that is truly training and can be considered as somebody on within the noble training is does not if this kabal means like uselessness. So it's person that is free of it is uselessness.
So ආර්ය පුද්ගලයා ගොඩක් වෙනස්. noble person කියලා ඔය කට්ටිය කියන්නේ.
So then you have people who have actual past knowledges, they are called noble person or noble people. So there are quite on even different level than that.
Oh, I think noble person ලා වෙන්න යන අයත් ඒ ටිකක් ඒකවලුත් හොඳ කට්ටිය. අර වගේ කබල් කට්ටිය නෙවෙයි.
So you can think they are really not. It's like normal people in a way they have a lot of this uselessness. So the more these noble people, they are people that have at least one past knowledge or more. So what I understood was like the more they are realized, the more they are removed from this uselessness.
ඒගොල්ලන්ට නමකුත් තියෙනවානේ කල්යාණ පතුජන කියලා. ගුරුගේ අන්ධ පතුජන දෙකම නැහැ.
So then there is something called the nice noble worldling and this blind worldling. So the blind worldling is the person that is not interested in any kind of spirituality, morality or anything at all. And the noble or beautiful worldling is a person that is interested in following this training.
Oh,
Anyway, so may you be well and happy and protected by the triple gem and thanks for listening.
English boating කියන්න